The first encounter. Richard Harper's world had once been marked by prosperity, comfort, and a carefully cultivated sense of control. But all of that dissolved the day he lost his daughter, Diana. Now his life had shrunken to a series of monotonous routines, the last of which brought him to the cemetery each month. The silent rows of gravestones and the hushed sway of trees had become his only place of solace, if solace was possible in a life where every step felt hollow. The November air bit into his skin as he walked, his steps crunching through frost-covered leaves. Richard moved steadily toward the corner plot, where Diana lay, the headstone polished and cold, etched with her name in large letters that felt like scars on his soul. His hands traced the rough granite as he whispered her name, a hollow ritual he performed in the hope it might bring him closer to her. But as always, he was left with only silence. Yet today, his solitude was broken by an unexpected sight. A figure, a young woman, was kneeling at Diana's grave, her head bowed and hands clasped in what seemed like a silent prayer. The sight caught Richard off guard. He hadn't expected anyone else to be here, much less someone in deep communion with his daughter's memory. His heart leaped in a mixture of irritation and bewilderment. Who was she, this stranger trespassing into his private realm of grief? She was dressed simply, in a long dark coat that stood out starkly against the bare trees. Her hair, a cascade of dark curls, framed a face he couldn't fully see. Richard observed her from a distance, trying to gather his thoughts. He wanted to turn around, to leave her to her moment and return later, but something held him there. She moved with an air of reverence that somehow unsettled him, as if she knew Diana in a way that he never had. After a few moments, the young woman finally rose from her position, brushing the damp earth from her knees. She turned, and her eyes met Richard's. They were deep, brown, and steady, carrying a quiet intensity that he found strangely disarming. There was no polite greeting, no surprise at his presence, just a silent acknowledgement, as if she had expected to see him there. Their gaze held for what felt like a long, suspended moment, a bridge across the chasm of loss and pain that had defined Richard's existence for so long. And then, with a slight nod, she turned and walked away, her steps silent against the frozen ground. Richard watched her leave, feeling as if he had missed a vital opportunity to understand something that eluded him. When she finally disappeared among the trees, Richard turned back to Diana's grave, his mind racing with questions. The cemetery had always been a place of quiet contemplation, but today it had become a place of mystery. Who was that woman, and what connection could she have to Diana? As he knelt beside the headstone, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A single white rose lay by the grave, fresh and delicate, its petals soft under the faint morning sun. Richard's hand reached out to touch the flower, feeling the subtle tremor of its petals. Had she placed it there? And if so, why? That night, Richard returned to his empty home, a grand estate now devoid of the laughter and warmth it once held. Each room carried remnants of Diana's life, her childhood toys, her teenage posters, and the last photograph they had taken together before she left for college. It was in this house, amidst these memories, that Richard had once believed he could shield her from life's unpredictable tragedies. He had poured his wealth and influence into giving her the best, from education to security. But in the end, none of it had mattered. The accident had taken her away, and he was left with a legacy that felt meaningless without her. Now, however, his mind was preoccupied with the woman he had seen. In a life that had become numb, she had stirred something he hadn't felt in years. A curiosity, an unfamiliar pull that was impossible to ignore. He couldn't shake the sense that her appearance was no coincidence. There was something more, something unspoken, binding her to his daughter's memory. The following morning, Richard awoke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. For once, his actions weren't driven by routine or obligation, but by a raw, gnawing need to understand. He found himself drawn back to the cemetery, his steps hurried, his breaths quick and shallow as he approached Diana's grave. But when he arrived, there was no one there. Only the quiet, unbroken stillness of the morning greeted him. Disappointment settled over him, thick and heavy, as he knelt beside the headstone once more. His fingers grazed the cold granite, tracing the letters of Diana's name, but his mind was elsewhere. He scanned the area, hoping for some sign of the young woman, but found nothing except the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. But just as he was about to turn away, his eyes fell on the ground by the grave. Another white rose lay there, freshly placed, and as pristine as the one he had found the day before. Richard's pulse quickened. It couldn't be a coincidence. The young woman was leaving these flowers, but why? And what could they mean? Over the following days, Richard returned to the cemetery, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. Each time he visited, a fresh rose awaited him by Diana's grave, its petals flawless and delicate, almost ethereal in their beauty. The mystery consumed him, pushing aside the wall of grief and numbness that had defined him for so long. On the 5th day, he finally saw her again. She was there, kneeling by the grave, her hands cupped around yet another rose as if she were offering it to Diana herself. This time, Richard didn't hesitate. He approached her, his footsteps soft but purposeful, until he stood just a few feet away. The young woman looked up, meeting his gaze with the same steady intensity as before. Her expression was calm, serene, as if she had been expecting him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion he hadn't realized was there. "And why are you here?" She regarded him quietly for a moment before she replied. "My name is Maria," she said, her voice soft and clear. "I knew your daughter, Mr. Harper." Her words struck him like a physical blow. He had thought he knew everything about Diana's life, but here was a stranger claiming to have known her in a way he hadn't. His chest tightened, emotions swirling within him, anger, confusion, and a strange, piercing sense of hope. "Why have you been leaving these roses?" he demanded, gesturing to the fresh flower in her hands. Maria looked down at the rose, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Because they were her favorite. White roses. She used to say they reminded her of peace and purity." Richard's heart clenched. He had never known this about his daughter, never realized her love for such a simple, elegant flower. And here was this young woman, Maria, carrying on a tradition he hadn't even known existed. "But how? How did you know her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria hesitated, her gaze shifting from the rose to the headstone, and then back to Richard. "Diana and I met years ago, when we were both very young. She was my friend, my closest friend, even though we came from different worlds." Her words hung in the cold air, filling the silence between them with the weight of something profound, something Richard couldn't fully grasp yet. But he knew, in that moment, that this woman held a key to his daughter's life, a life that he had believed he understood, but now realized had been far more complex, more beautiful than he had ever imagined. And so, with a quiet determination, he took a deep breath and asked the question that had been burning within him since he first saw her at the grave. "Will you tell me about her?" Unveiling the past. Richard felt a pang in his chest. Diana had always been drawn to art, but he had considered it a passing hobby, something to entertain her until she was ready to take on a more substantial pursuit. He had encouraged her to focus on academics, to follow the path he had laid out for her, guiding her toward a future he believed would protect her. But now, hearing Maria's words, he wondered how much of Diana's heart he had never truly known. "Diana and I connected instantly," Maria continued, her eyes distant, as if she were reliving those days. "She had this kindness that was so rare. She didn't care about appearances or wealth. She saw people for who they really were. When she looked at you, it was like she could see right into your soul. She had that gift, you know." Richard swallowed hard. He remembered moments, rare and fleeting, when Diana had looked at him that way, her young eyes full of unspoken questions, perhaps even judgments. He had always shrugged it off, chalking it up to teenage rebellion. Now he began to wonder if he had been avoiding something, perhaps a truth about himself that he wasn't ready to face. Every morning at camp, we'd sneak out before dawn to watch the sunrise over the lake. Maria continued, her voice warm with nostalgia. She'd bring her sketchbook, and I'd bring my journal. We'd sit there in silence, sometimes for hours, just absorbing the beauty around us. Diana used to say that those moments felt like freedom. She'd talk about wanting to capture that feeling in her art, to give it to others. Richard closed his eyes, letting Maria's words paint images of his daughter, as she must have been then, young, idealistic, full of dreams that reached far beyond the boundaries he had set for her. He felt a sharp ache, a guilt that cut deeper than he had expected. He had thought he was providing Diana with a secure life, yet perhaps he had unwittingly taken something precious from her, her freedom. Richard's question hung in the crisp morning air, a vulnerable request from a man unaccustomed to sharing his pain. He had spent so many years locked away from the memories, shielded by layers of cold, practical thinking. But now, as he stood beside Maria, he felt something softening, something opening. His mind yearned to understand, to uncover the pieces of Diana's life he hadn't seen, hidden beneath his own blindness. Maria looked at him, as if weighing the request, her eyes holding a quiet depth that was both comforting and unsettling. She nodded gently, and they moved to a nearby bench where they could speak more freely. Richard felt the weight of this encounter settling over him, a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Maria held the rose delicately, as if it were Diana herself she was cradling. "I first met Diana when we were both 16, she began, her voice soft yet unwavering. "It was at a summer camp, a retreat for young artists. Actually, she was painting by the lake, focused on her canvas, oblivious to everything around her. I remember how her hands moved, so sure, so graceful. She was creating a world only she could see. Those summers became our tradition," Maria said, pulling him from his thoughts. "Every year, we'd meet at that same camp, and we'd spend days together, sharing our dreams, talking about the future. Diana always said she wanted to see the world, to live in a way that wasn't bound by rules or expectations. She dreamed of traveling, of painting places no one else had ever seen." Richard's hands trembled. He had known of Diana's restlessness, but he had dismissed it, seeing it as youthful impatience. His vision of her future had been far more conventional. College, a stable career, marriage, a family. But now, sitting here with Maria, he realized just how deeply he had misunderstood her. "I remember one summer," Maria continued, her eyes growing distant. "Diana and I were watching the sunset, and she told me she felt like her life was a painting someone else had started, and she was only adding strokes here and there, never really shaping it. She was trying to break free, but she felt trapped." Richard's heart clenched. Those words, "a painting someone else had started," echoed painfully in his mind. Had he been that someone else, laying the foundations of a life that Diana had never truly wanted? Had he been blind to the struggle she had kept hidden behind her gentle smiles and dutiful obedience? What did she say about me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, afraid of the answer but needing to know. Maria looked at him, her gaze softening. "She loved you, Mr. Harper. She respected you deeply. But there was a distance she couldn't bridge, and I think it pained her more than she ever let on. She wanted you to see her as she was, not as the daughter you wanted her to be." Her words hit him with the force of a tidal wave, pulling him under layers of guilt, regret, and sorrow he had buried for years. He remembered how, after Diana's death, he had been consumed with anger and frustration. He had felt that his life's work had been undone, that everything he had built had lost its purpose. But perhaps he realized now, the fault was his own, not life's cruel design. Maria continued, "After high school, Diana and I drifted apart. She went to college, and I took a different path. But she reached out to me a year before she died. She told me she was planning a trip, a journey to rediscover herself. She wanted to see the world through her own eyes, not the lens of expectation. She said it was time to finish her own painting. Richard's heart sank. Diana had never told him about this plan. He had thought her focus was on her studies, on achieving the goals they had set together. But her true dreams had been hidden from him, shared only with this young woman, Maria, who had been her confidant in ways he never could. Did she ever blame me?" he asked, his voice trembling. Maria hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "No, she never blamed you. She understood that you wanted the best for her, but she wished you could see her, truly see her, without the expectations or the plans. She longed for a connection that went beyond duty or legacy." Richard's eyes filled with tears. He had always prided himself on his ability to see people clearly, to judge character, and make decisions that were sound and practical. Yet here, in the most important relationship of his life, he had failed. He had looked at Diana not as his daughter, but as a reflection of his own ambitions, his legacy. And in doing so, he had lost her. As he sat there in silence, Maria placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Mr. Harper," she said softly, "Diana loved you deeply. She knew you had your own burdens, your own fears. But perhaps it's not too late to make amends, to honor her memory in a way that celebrates who she truly was." Richard looked at her, a glimmer of hope piercing through his grief. How can I do that?" Maria smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both sadness and wisdom. "She had a journal," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "A journal she kept since we were teenagers, filled with her dreams, her art, her thoughts. I have it. She gave it to me a few months before she passed, asking me to hold on to it, to protect it. Maybe it's time for you to read it." Richard felt a surge of emotion, a need to see this journal, to hold the pages that Diana had filled with her dreams and thoughts. It was as though a door had been opened, offering him a glimpse of the daughter he had lost, the person she had been behind the facade he had unknowingly imposed on her. "Would you let me see it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Maria nodded, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small worn notebook. Its cover was simple, faded from years of handling. She handed it to him, her gaze steady. "This is her legacy, Mr. Harper," she said softly. "Not the wealth or the future you imagined for her, but this. Her dreams, her truths. She wanted you to know her, and maybe through these pages you finally can." Richard took the journal, his hands trembling as he opened the cover. The first page bore Diana's delicate handwriting, a simple message that sent a wave of bittersweet sorrow through him. "To the one who seeks, may you find." As he turned the pages, his vision blurred with tears, each word, each sketch, each thought revealing a world he had never known. It was like meeting his daughter for the first time, and though the weight of regret was heavy, he felt a strange sense of peace as well. Through this journal, he was beginning a journey not just of mourning, but of discovery, a chance to understand the person Diana had been, and perhaps to honor her in a way he had never imagined. And beside him, Maria watched quietly, her presence a silent testament to the friendship that had bridged the chasm between a father and his daughter, offering him a second chance to know the heart he had once overlooked. Discovering Diana's secrets. Richard held the journal close as he left the cemetery, his heart heavy with both sorrow and anticipation. This small book, worn from years of being filled with Diana's thoughts and dreams, felt more precious to him than anything he had ever possessed. In his mind, it wasn't merely a collection of pages, but a pathway to a life he had only seen from the outside. The weight of his mistakes, his blindness to her true self, sat heavily on him as he drove back to his estate, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. When he arrived home, he settled into his study, a room that had once been his sanctuary, filled with shelves of leather-bound books and polished mahogany furniture. But now it felt more like a mausoleum, a place that echoed with memories of Diana's visits, her laughter, and the time she had come to him seeking a connection he had failed to offer. He set the journal down on the polished wood of his desk and took a deep breath, preparing himself to meet Diana in these pages, to confront both her dreams and his failures. As he opened the journal, the first entry took him back years, to when Diana had been just a teenager. Her handwriting was careful, neat, as if she had taken her time to record each thought with precision. The entry read, "Today was the first day at the art camp. I felt so alive, like I was finally surrounded by people who understood me. I met a girl named Maria. She's quiet but fierce, and I feel like she sees something in me that no one else does. We talked by the lake for hours, and I told her about my dreams, my fears. It's strange. I've never been able to open up like this, but with her, it felt natural." Richard's fingers traced the words. He could almost picture his young daughter, sitting by the lake, talking to Maria, sharing her dreams freely, unencumbered by the expectations he had unwittingly imposed on her. He read on, finding entries filled with descriptions of her art, her aspirations, her restlessness. Each page held pieces of a Diana he had never known, a young woman who longed for freedom, for authenticity, for a life that was hers to shape. As he delved further into the journal, he came across a page that seemed hastily written, the words slightly smeared as if Diana had written them in a rush, or perhaps through tears. "Sometimes I feel like I'm trapped in a life that doesn't belong to me. Dad has all these dreams for me, these plans, and I know he means well. But they're his dreams, not mine. I wish he could see me for who I am, not who he wants me to be. I love him, but it's so hard to be the daughter he wants. I feel like I'm disappointing him just by wanting something different. How do I tell him? Would he understand?" Richard's heart twisted. He realized that his daughter's silence hadn't been a sign of acquiescence, but a product of her fear, her worry that he would never accept her true self. He closed his eyes, feeling the tears well up, and pressed his hand against the page, as if by touching her words he could somehow touch her spirit, offer her the understanding he had failed to provide in life. The journal entries continued, detailing Diana's growing friendship with Maria, their conversations about life, art, and freedom. Through the words, Richard began to see Diana's vibrant personality in full color, her passions, her rebellious thoughts, her determination to find her own path. There was an entry describing her fascination with travel, her desire to visit places untouched by the predictable routines of her life. "I want to see places that make me feel small," she had written. "Mountains that scrape the sky, oceans that go on forever. I want to live fully, to taste freedom. Maybe someday I'll break free. I'll paint what I see, feel the world under my feet. I can't stay in this cage forever." The words filled him with a sense of both pride and pain. He admired her spirit, her yearning for a life beyond convention, but he couldn't shake the guilt that he had been the one constructing the bars of that cage. The life he had built for her, with its comforts and privileges, had been his gift, but in his desire to protect her, he had unwittingly imprisoned her. He turned to the next page, and this time, the entry was dated just a few months before her death. The handwriting was different, hastier, more intense, as if Diana had written in a rush of emotion. "I talked to Maria today about my plan. She said I should go for it. That life is too short to waste on fear. I told her about my dream to travel, to leave everything behind and just live. But there's Dad. He wouldn't understand. He'd see it as a betrayal, as if I'm throwing away everything he's given me. How can I make him see that I need this? That I need to live my life on my own terms?" Richard felt his heart shatter at those words. Diana had been afraid to tell him her dreams, worried that he would see them as a rejection of his love, his support. He had never realized that she had been carrying this conflict alone, torn between her love for him and her desire to live authentically. The unspoken words between them, the misunderstandings and unfulfilled wishes, felt like a weight he could no longer bear. Turning the page, he found a final entry, a letter of sorts, written as if it were meant for him. The words were hesitant, filled with pauses and erasures, as if she had struggled to express what was in her heart. "Dad, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I love you. I know you've always tried to do what's best for me, and I'm grateful. But I need to find my own way, even if it's hard for you to understand. I hope that someday you'll see me for who I am, not just as your daughter, but as a person with her own dreams. I hope you can be proud of me, even if I don't follow the path you set out." The letter ended abruptly, as if Diana had stopped herself, unsure of how to convey the depth of her feelings. Richard closed the journal, clutching it to his chest, feeling the pain and the love of her words sinking into his heart. For the first time, he truly saw his daughter, not as an extension of himself, but as a unique soul who had fought to be free. Over the next few days, Richard found himself returning to the journal again and again, reading and rereading Diana's words, piecing together the life she had envisioned for herself. He felt a new resolve forming within him, a desire not to mourn her, but to honor her, to ensure that her dreams, her desires, would not be lost to the silence of the grave. The realization settled in him like a quiet revelation. Diana's legacy wasn't the wealth he had planned to pass down, nor the structured life he had hoped she'd follow. Her legacy was one of passion, of freedom, of embracing life with all its uncertainties. And though she was gone, Richard knew he could still keep that legacy alive. Driven by this newfound purpose, Richard began to make changes. He reached out to Maria, meeting her again at the lake where she and Diana had shared so many dreams. He found solace in hearing more about Diana's time at the camp, her laughter, her love for simple pleasures, the way she had inspired those around her. Then he decided to take a bolder step. He contacted Diana's former college, proposing a scholarship in her name, one that would support young artists with big dreams and limited means. It was a small gesture, but he knew it was something Diana would have loved, a way to give others the freedom she had yearned for. But it didn't end there. Richard began to travel, tracing the paths Diana had dreamt of, visiting the places she had longed to see. He went to the mountains, feeling their grandeur and understanding why she had wanted to stand in their shadow. He stood by the sea, feeling its vastness, the endless horizon that had called to her. With each journey, he carried her journal with him, reading her words in the places she had dreamed of visiting. It was as if he were finally walking alongside her, sharing in the life she had imagined. Each place he visited brought him closer to her, his grief slowly transforming into something softer, a bittersweet joy as he embraced the spirit of the daughter he had finally come to know. One day, standing on the edge of a cliff overlooking the vast blue of the ocean, he opened the journal one last time, reading the words she had written about freedom and beauty. And in that moment, he felt her presence, no longer as a memory, but as a living spirit that had touched his life, transformed it, and shown him the beauty of letting go. As he closed the journal, Richard realized that though Diana was gone, her essence would always be with him. She had taught him something he hadn't known in life, but had come to understand through her words, her art, and her dreams. He had, at last, found his way to the daughter he had lost, and though it had taken him years and countless miles, he knew that he had finally become the father she had always hoped he would be. In her memory, he had found redemption, not in wealth or achievement, but in understanding, compassion, and love. And with that understanding, he was finally, truly free, embracing Diana's legacy. The following months brought a profound change in Richard's life. He continued to visit places that Diana had dreamed of seeing, but this journey was no longer simply about fulfilling his daughter's wishes. It had transformed into a personal pilgrimage of self-discovery. Each destination brought him closer to understanding the daughter he had lost, and the parts of himself he had long buried under the weight of ambition and control. One day, while resting in a small cafe in Paris, a city Diana had been infatuated with, Richard found himself sketching the cafe scene, capturing the lives of people passing by. It felt strange, almost surreal. He hadn't picked up a pencil to draw in decades, not since he was a young man with dreams of his own. But today, he felt Diana's presence urging him forward, reminding him of his forgotten passion. His hands were rusty, but as he moved the pencil across the page, he found an unexpected sense of peace, a connection not only to Diana, but to a part of himself he had neglected for too long. The cafe owner, an elderly Frenchwoman with a warm smile, came over to look at his sketch. She complimented his work, noting the details in his lines, the precision of his strokes. Richard was taken aback. He hadn't thought anyone would notice, but in that moment he felt a surge of pride, not just for his drawing, but for honoring the memory of Diana's spirit through art. The woman offered him a warm pastry and a seat by the window, sensing that he was not just another tourist, but someone on a journey of healing. Sitting by that window, watching the vibrant life of Paris unfold before him, Richard thought back to the journal entries that had described Diana's dreams of this very city. She had written about walking along the Seine, admiring the art at the Louvre, and savoring the simple beauty of street cafes. As he sketched, he realized he wasn't just seeing the world through his eyes, but through hers, feeling the beauty she had longed to experience. After a few days in Paris, Richard received a letter from Maria, who had stayed in touch with him since their meeting at the cemetery. She had shared more memories of Diana, more stories of her free-spirited nature, and each story had deepened his connection to his daughter's true self. In her letter, Maria mentioned that she was organizing a small exhibit in honor of Diana, a showcase of her artwork that would be held in their hometown. "She would want you to be there," Maria wrote. "I think it's a chance to share her art with the world, to show people the beauty she saw in life. And I know she would want her father to be part of it." The idea filled Richard with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had seen some of Diana's artwork before, small sketches she'd left lying around the house or paintings she created as a child. But he had never taken her art seriously, never truly understood the depth of emotion and expression she had poured into it. Now, as he prepared to attend the exhibit, he realized he would finally see her work as it was meant to be seen, as an extension of her soul. The exhibit was set in a modest community gallery, its walls adorned with Diana's paintings, sketches, and photographs. Richard arrived early, walking through the quiet halls, taking in the beauty of her creations. Each piece seemed to capture a different aspect of her personality, from delicate watercolors of serene landscapes to bold, abstract compositions that spoke of her inner struggles and dreams. In one corner, a series of self-portraits caught his eye, each one revealing a different emotion: joy, sorrow, wonder, defiance. He paused in front of a portrait that took his breath away. It was a painting of a young girl sitting by a lake, her reflection shimmering in the water. The girl's expression was pensive, her eyes distant, as if lost in a dream. Richard recognized the lake. It was the one where Diana had met Maria, where she had spent so many summers finding solace in the quiet beauty of nature. The painting radiated a sense of longing, a desire for freedom, and an unmistakable vulnerability. He felt a tear slip down his cheek as he realized the girl in the painting was Diana herself, captured in a moment of introspection that he had never been privy to. He could almost feel her presence beside him, as if she were standing there, watching him with the same gentle patience she had always shown in life. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said softly from behind him. He turned to see Maria standing there, her expression tender and filled with empathy. She looked different than he remembered, more mature, as if the time spent honoring Diana's memory had given her a quiet strength. They shared a moment of silence, gazing at the painting, both lost in their memories of Diana. "She painted this during our last summer together," Maria said, her voice breaking slightly. "She told me it was how she felt, caught between two worlds, the one she was expected to live in and the one she dreamed of. She hoped that someday she could bridge the gap between them." Richard nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. He felt a renewed sense of guilt, but also a strange comfort, as if this exhibit was Diana's way of reaching out to him, of helping him understand her in a way he hadn't been able to when she was alive. As they continued walking through the gallery, Maria guided him to a display that showcased Diana's journal entries alongside some of her smaller sketches. Richard felt a pang of recognition as he saw the familiar handwriting, the words he had read so many times, now shared with the world. He had once thought of these entries as private, a window into his daughter's soul that only he had been privileged to see. But seeing them here, in this public space, he realized that Diana's spirit was too vibrant, too beautiful to keep hidden. She wanted to make a difference. Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Diana used to talk about creating a foundation for young artists, a place where they could explore their talents without restrictions, where they could be free to express themselves. She wanted to give them what she never had, a chance to live authentically. Richard felt a swell of pride. His daughter's dream was no longer just an idea. It was a legacy he could carry forward. And for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his own ambitions. He looked at Maria, his eyes filled with gratitude and determination. "Let's make it happen," he said firmly. "Let's create this foundation in her honor. I'll fund it. I'll support it, whatever it takes. I want to give her dream a chance to live on." Maria's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "She would have been so proud, Mr. Harper. She always believed in you, even when it was hard." The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of plans and meetings, but for the first time in years, Richard felt alive. He poured his resources into establishing the Diana Harper Foundation for Young Artists, a place that would provide grants, mentorship, and opportunities for aspiring creatives to explore their talents without the constraints of traditional expectations. He wanted it to be a space where young people could feel the freedom Diana had longed for, a space where they could express themselves without fear of judgment. Richard became deeply involved in the foundation's work, personally reviewing applications, attending art shows, and meeting with young artists who reminded him of his daughter. He found joy in their passion, their raw talent, and their eagerness to embrace the world with open hearts. Each artist he met felt like a new connection to Diana, a chance to honor her legacy by nurturing the dreams she had never been able to fully pursue. One evening, as he sat in his study going through applications, he came across a letter from a young artist named Elise. She wrote about her love for painting, her struggles with self-doubt, and her desire to find her own voice in a world that often felt stifling. Her words echoed Diana's so closely that Richard felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu, as if his daughter were speaking to him through this young artist. He invited Elise to the foundation for an interview, and when she arrived, he was struck by her spirit, her quiet resilience, and the spark of determination in her eyes. They talked for hours, discussing her art, her goals, and her dreams. Richard felt an immediate connection with her, a sense of kinship that transcended words. Before she left, he handed her a small sketchbook he had kept, one that Diana had left behind. "This belonged to my daughter," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "She would want you to have it, to fill it with your own dreams, your own art." Elisa's eyes widened with gratitude as she took the sketchbook, cradling it as if it were a priceless treasure. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. I promise I'll honor her memory with every page." As she left, Richard sat back, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. He realized that he had found a way to keep Diana's spirit alive, not only through the foundation, but through the lives of the young artists he was helping. In nurturing their dreams, he was finally giving his daughter the freedom she had always wanted. In the quiet of his study, he looked at a photograph of Diana, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with the spark of life. He felt her presence, a warmth that transcended time and loss, and he whispered a silent promise that he would carry her spirit forward, that he would honor her legacy by helping others find the freedom she had sought. For the first time since her death, he felt at peace. His journey was far from over, but he knew he was no longer alone. Through her art, her dreams, and the foundation he had created in her name, Diana would always be with him, guiding him as he helped others find their own paths to freedom. A journey toward healing. Richard awoke early on a spring morning, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. The Diana Harper Foundation had officially opened its doors, and today was the first day he would welcome a new group of young artists into the program. It had taken months of planning, late nights, and deep emotional reflection, but Richard had poured his heart and soul into building this foundation. Every detail was crafted with Diana's memory in mind, from the studios filled with natural light to the quiet garden spaces for reflection, all of it a tribute to the daughter he had finally come to understand. Standing in the main hall of the foundation's building, he looked around with pride. The walls were adorned with paintings, sketches, and sculptures created by the first group of scholarship recipients. The vibrancy of the colors, the creativity spilling from every brushstroke and pencil line, filled the room with an energy that felt both exhilarating and humbling. Richard could almost feel Diana's presence beside him, watching with that gentle, knowing smile he had come to treasure through her journal entries. The artists began to arrive, their faces a mixture of excitement and nervousness, as they gathered in the large atrium where Richard stood. He observed them, recognizing the spark of ambition and the weight of dreams that each carried. He saw a younger version of Diana in every face, each artist a living testament to her spirit. Richard greeted them warmly, sensing a kinship with these young creatives that transcended age and experience. As he addressed the group, he felt a tremor of vulnerability that was new to him, a raw openness he had rarely shown in his former life. He cleared his throat and began, "Welcome to the Diana Harper Foundation. This place was created with one purpose: to give you the freedom to pursue your art, to find your voice, and to live the life you envision for yourself. My daughter Diana dreamed of a place like this, where young artists could flourish without the pressures of expectation or limitation." He paused, gathering himself as he saw the attentive faces before him. Diana was a remarkable soul, full of compassion and creativity. She taught me that life is meant to be lived authentically, that art isn't just something you create, but a reflection of who you are. I'm honored to support you all in this journey, and I hope that through your art, you can keep her spirit alive. The artists erupted into applause, and Richard felt a swell of emotion that was both overwhelming and deeply fulfilling. After the group dispersed to explore the studios and galleries, he wandered through the foundation, watching as the artists settled into their new spaces, setting up their easels and unpacking their tools. He saw the quiet determination in their movements, the glimmer of hope in their eyes, and knew that Diana's legacy was taking root in a way he had never imagined. As he continued through the halls, he noticed a young woman standing alone by one of the larger canvases, her gaze distant, as if lost in thought. She held a brush loosely in her hand, poised but hesitant. Richard recognized her from the scholarship interviews. Her name was Hannah, a talented painter with a unique style, but who had struggled with self-doubt and insecurities about her work. He approached her gently, careful not to disturb her creative space. "Beautiful work," he commented, nodding toward the half-finished painting on the canvas. The piece depicted a series of overlapping landscapes, each layer revealing a different emotion: serenity, chaos, hope, sorrow, all blending together in a striking display of colors and textures. Hannah turned, surprised by his presence, but she smiled shyly. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. I've been trying to capture a sense of balance, I guess. I want to show that all these emotions can exist together, even if they seem contradictory." Richard nodded, feeling the surge of admiration. "That's a profound insight, Hannah. Art has a way of expressing what words cannot, of unifying the pieces of ourselves that we often try to keep separate." Hannah glanced back at her painting, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough, like my work isn't worth sharing. But being here, seeing Diana's story, her art, it makes me feel less alone. Like maybe there's a place for what I want to say after all." Richard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Diana would have wanted you to believe in yourself, Hannah. She struggled with those same doubts, but she found strength in expressing them. Remember, this place is here to support you, to let you explore your art without judgment." Hannah's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. I think being here will help me find that strength." Richard left her to her work, feeling a deep satisfaction that went beyond words. In moments like these, he felt a connection to Diana that transcended death. By helping these young artists find their voices, he was giving life to her dreams, allowing her spirit to flow through each brushstroke, each piece of art created in her name. As the weeks passed, Richard became more than just a benefactor to the artists. He became a mentor, a father figure. He spent hours talking with them about their work, encouraging them, listening to their struggles. The walls of the foundation filled with their creations, each piece a celebration of individuality and resilience. And in supporting their journeys, he felt his own wounds begin to heal, as if the love he was giving to them was also soothing the parts of himself that had long been neglected. One evening, Maria came to visit the foundation. She had become a close friend, a confidant who understood the depth of Richard's grief and transformation. They walked through the gallery together, pausing by a new installation that featured a collection of Diana's own paintings, curated by Maria. Each piece represented a different phase of Diana's life, from her early sketches to the more mature, complex pieces she had created in the years before her death. "I can't believe it's finally real," Maria said, her voice filled with emotion. "Diana's work, her dreams, you've made them a reality, Richard. She would be so proud of you." Richard nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I never thought I could find peace after losing her, but somehow, working with these young artists, seeing them blossom, it feels like she's here, like she's guiding me." "It's strange, Maria. I thought I was helping them, but in truth, they've given me a new life." They stopped in front of a particular painting of Diana's, a self-portrait she had done in her early 20s. It was a haunting piece, capturing a young woman with searching eyes, looking both hopeful and melancholy, as if caught between dreams and reality. Richard felt as if Diana were looking straight into his soul, acknowledging his journey and his transformation. Maria placed a hand on his arm. "She saw you, you know. She always believed that you would understand her, even if it took time. I think this," she gestured to the foundation around them, "was her way of bringing you back to yourself." Richard looked at Maria, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for guiding me through this, Maria. I couldn't have done it without you." Diana's legacy lives on not just through this foundation, but through the friendship you shared with her, the memories you've so generously given me. In the following months, the foundation grew, attracting artists from across the country. The Diana Harper Foundation became known not just as a place of artistic freedom, but as a sanctuary, a haven where artists could find acceptance, inspiration, and community. Richard took an active role in the lives of the artists, attending their exhibitions, cheering them on during their struggles, and witnessing their triumphs. As the foundation's reputation flourished, so did Richard's own life. He began to reconnect with old friends, sharing his journey of grief and healing with them. He even rekindled a friendship with his estranged brother, whom he hadn't spoken to since Diana's death. Their relationship, once strained by misunderstandings and pride, became a source of comfort and support. On the anniversary of the foundation's opening, the artists organized a special exhibit to honor Diana. They filled the gallery with new works inspired by her, each piece a personal interpretation of her life, her dreams, her spirit. Richard walked through the exhibit, overwhelmed by the depth of their tributes. Each piece felt like a conversation with Diana, a new way of seeing her, of understanding the impact she had left on so many lives. At the end of the evening, Hannah approached him, holding a small gift wrapped in delicate paper. "I made this for you," she said, her cheeks flushing. "It's my way of saying thank you for everything." Richard unwrapped the gift to find a small, beautifully crafted book. Inside were sketches, poems, and letters from each of the artists, thanking him for the foundation, for his support, for giving them the chance to live their dreams. The final page was a message from Hannah herself, written with raw honesty. Thank you for showing us that love and loss can create something beautiful, something lasting. You've given us the gift of Diana's spirit, and through her, you've shown us what it means to truly live. I hope you know that you've changed our lives, just as she changed yours." Richard held the book close, feeling a profound sense of completion. The pain of losing Diana would never fully disappear, but he had found a way to turn that pain into love, into a legacy that would live on through each artist, each piece of art, each dream that was fulfilled. And as he stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by the work of the young artists he had come to cherish, he felt Diana's presence beside him. Steady, peaceful, and proud. The journey he had undertaken, once so dark and filled with grief, had led him to a place of healing, of redemption. And though his daughter was gone, her spirit would forever live on, woven into the fabric of every life he touched through her legacy. The legacy of love and renewal. Years passed, and Richard Harper watched as the Diana Harper Foundation blossomed into something more profound than he had ever imagined. What had started as a way to honor his daughter's life had transformed into a vibrant, thriving community of artists, a family bound by creativity, support, and the shared experience of expressing their truths. With each passing year, Richard found himself drawn deeper into this community, becoming not just a benefactor, but a mentor, a friend, and even a father figure to many. As the foundation grew, so did Richard's relationship with the artists. He learned their stories, celebrated their achievements, and offered guidance when they faced setbacks. The young people who entered the foundation came from diverse backgrounds, each bringing their own unique voice and vision. Richard found himself not only supporting their art, but also supporting their journeys of self-discovery, often marveling at the resilience and depth of the human spirit. He felt Diana's presence most strongly during these moments, as if her energy flowed through each artist, manifesting in their work and their dreams. One particularly gifted young artist, Malik, reminded him so much of Diana. Malik had endured a difficult childhood, growing up in foster care and battling self-doubt. But within him burned a fierce passion for art, a talent that had remained largely untapped until he joined the foundation. Richard took Malik under his wing, offering him encouragement and resources that helped the young artist flourish. Malik's paintings were raw and emotional, capturing the beauty and pain of his experiences with such intensity that Richard often found himself moved to tears. One evening, after an exhibit featuring Malik's work, Richard pulled him aside. "You have a rare gift, Malik," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I see so much of Diana's spirit in you, the courage to face your pain and turn it into something beautiful. She would have been so proud of you." Malik looked up at him, his expression vulnerable yet grateful. "I owe it all to this foundation, Mr. Harper," he said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. I feel like I'm allowed to be myself, to share my story. You've given me that chance." Richard's heart swelled with pride. "You deserve to be seen, Malik. Your story matters, and it's an honor to witness your journey." As the years went on, Malik's work gained recognition, and he became one of the foundation's most celebrated artists. His success was a testament to the foundation's impact, and Richard felt as though he were fulfilling Diana's dream with every achievement Malik and other artists like him reached. He understood now that the foundation was about more than art. It was about empowering young people to claim their identities, to express their truths, and to live without fear of judgment. Yet as fulfilling as the foundation was, Richard's journey wasn't without its moments of solitude and reflection. There were nights when he sat alone in his study, Diana's journal resting on the table beside him. The words faded but still alive with her dreams. The ache of her absence lingered, a reminder that even as he had found purpose in her legacy, there was a part of him that would always long for her presence. He often found himself talking to her, sharing his thoughts, his fears, and his hopes as though she were still there, listening with her gentle understanding. On one such night, Richard received an invitation to speak at a major art conference in New York City. The invitation came with a special request. The organizers wanted him to present the story of the Diana Harper Foundation, to share the journey that had turned his grief into a transformative force in the art world. Richard hesitated. Public speaking had never been his strength, and the thought of standing before an audience to speak about Diana felt both daunting and deeply personal. But after reflecting on it, he knew this was something he needed to do, not just for himself, but for Diana and the legacy they had built together. When the day of the conference arrived, Richard stood on the stage, facing an audience of artists, critics, and patrons from all over the world. His hands trembled slightly as he began, but he took a deep breath, focusing on the memory of Diana and the countless artists who had found solace and strength through the foundation. He began to speak, sharing the story of his journey, of a father's love and regret, of the transformative power of art, and of the community that had grown from a place of loss. Diana taught me that art is more than a skill or a career. It's a language of the soul, he said, his voice steadying with each word. Through her, I learned that expressing one's truth is an act of courage, a path to freedom. And when she left this world, I was left with the realization that I had only ever seen a fraction of who she was. This foundation, this community, they have been my way of honoring her, of coming to know her in a way I never did in life. The audience listened in rapt silence, their faces reflecting empathy and admiration. Richard continued, sharing stories of the artists he had met, of the impact Diana's vision had left on their lives. He spoke of Malik, of Hannah, of Elise, and countless others who had found their voices through the foundation, each one a testament to Diana's enduring influence. As he finished his speech, he looked out at the crowd, his heart full of gratitude. When he stepped down from the stage, he was met with applause, but more importantly, he was met with an overwhelming sense of peace. Speaking about Diana, about the journey he had taken to honor her, felt like a final step in his healing, a way of releasing the last of his grief and embracing the life he had built from it. As he walked through the conference hall afterward, many attendees approached him to share their own stories of loss, of dreams deferred, and of finding purpose in unexpected ways. One woman, an artist in her 70s, took his hand and thanked him with tears in her eyes. "Your story reminded me of my own daughter," she said softly. "She, too, was an artist, but I never understood her. I wish I had listened more, cherished her dreams. Thank you for giving a voice to what so many of us feel." The connection he felt with these strangers, each one touched by his story, strengthened his resolve to continue the work he had started. He returned to the foundation with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to expand its reach, to open its doors to even more young artists in need of a sanctuary. Years went by, and as Richard aged, he took steps to ensure the foundation would continue long after he was gone. He established a board of directors, bringing in former scholarship recipients like Malik and Hannah, who had grown into accomplished artists and mentors themselves. Together, they developed plans to open additional branches, bringing Diana's legacy to new cities, new communities, and new generations of artists. The foundation became a beacon of hope and inspiration, a place where young people could find belonging, courage, and the freedom to express their truths. As his health began to decline, Richard found himself spending more time in the foundation's quiet garden, a space he had designed as a place of reflection and peace. It was his favorite spot, filled with flowers and plants Diana had loved, and he often sat there, reading her journal, feeling close to her spirit. On his last day, he asked to be taken to the garden one final time. Surrounded by the beauty Diana had once dreamed of, he felt a sense of calm, a readiness to let go. As he closed his eyes, memories of her filled his mind. Not just the memories of her childhood, but the memories he had gained through her art, through the stories her friends and the foundation's artists had shared with him. In those final moments, he felt Diana's presence as clearly as if she were beside him. And in his heart, he knew he had done right by her, that he had honored her life in a way that transcended grief and regret. Her legacy was not just a building or a name, but a living, breathing community of souls bound by love, art, and the courage to be true to oneself. As he took his last breath, Richard left this world with a heart that had been broken, but had found healing through love, understanding, and renewal. He left behind a legacy that would outlast him, a legacy that would inspire countless others to live freely, to embrace their dreams, and to find peace within their own journeys. And somewhere, in a place beyond time and space, he knew Diana was waiting for him, her hand outstretched, her eyes filled with that same gentle, knowing smile.